Now, here is one of my favorite bean recipes, the old-fashioned Boston baked beans. And the Massachusetts tradition of eating baked beans for dinner on Saturday night seems to have originated in Puritan Boston. The Sabbath started at sundown on Saturday, and according to Puritan belief, no work was to be done until sundown on Sunday. So on Saturday morning, the bean pot was put in the low heat of the fireplace oven, probably one of those old-fashioned beehive ovens, either next to the fireplace or in the back of the fireplace, and in the hopes that the beans would be ready by supper time. And the leftovers were kept warm in the fireplace and served for breakfast on Sunday. So this is my recipe for Boston baked beans. We have soaked some very nice pinto beans. They've been washed, scrubbed, and soaked for 24 hours, 2 pounds of beans. And I am now going to drain those beans. We're not going to reserve the soaking liquid. We're just going to use the soaked beans. And you can use navy beans, pinto beans, cranberry beans. You can choose, but pinto beans work very, very nicely. I've used them several times. And navy beans are a little bit smaller bean, and I've used those quite a few times. So now this is a very simple recipe, although it takes several hours to cook. Now it's best, I think, to use a bean pot. This is a newfangled bean pot. Old bean pots were the typical crock-looking beige with a brown stripe and a little cover on the top. But this works very, very nicely. Put in the bottom of the pot 1 large onion, halved and sliced into, it's about 1/4-inch slices. And these just strew these right in the bottom of the pot. Smells good. 4 canned plum tomatoes. And if you don't have plum tomatoes, you can use, heaven forbid, about 1/2 cup of ketchup. You also use some dry mustard, 1 tablespoon plus a teaspoon. A couple bay leaves, broken, put that in. And 12 whole cloves, throw those in. And 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. This can also go right into the bottom. I like dark brown sugar. And salt, a tablespoon of salt. Tablespoon plus a teaspoon. And about 1/2 a teaspoon of black pepper. So that's pretty much it, except for molasses, which I like to put over the top, salt pork, and fresh water. And your soaked beans go right into the bean pot. You can sprinkle a little bit more salt over the top. And unsulfured molasses, 1/2 cup. And I like to go over the entire top. Get every last bit. You might even want to use a little bit more molasses. Some people like really dark baked beans. I do. And now the last thing to do is put your salt pork over the top. Big, chunky pieces. Like that. And add 5 cups of water. I don't stir, I don't do anything. I just leave it just like this. Now, cover and transfer to a 300-degree preheated oven. And you're going to bake these covered without stirring until the beans are tender and the liquid has thickened, about 6 hours. Now you can check the beans every 45 minutes or so, adding more boiling water if necessary to keep the beans slightly soupy at all times, but not soaky wet. Well, hopefully the beans are done. And they look so good. Look what's happened to those beautiful, beautiful pinto beans. They certainly have changed color. And you can taste them. Just see if they need any salt or pepper. They taste just right. The salt pork is fallen apart just like it should. And if you have some bread, Boston brown bread, some hot dogs, potato salad. You can enjoy a hearty bowl of Boston baked beans. Delicious. Today we're going to show you the best macaroni and cheese, and that too uses a bechamel with 4 kinds of wonderful cheese. To make the bechamel, start with 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter in a saucepan like this. To the melted butter, we add 1/4 of a cup of flour. I use all-purpose unbleached flour, and this is the basis for the bechamel. It's also called a roux. The roux cooks the flour, allowing the starch molecules to expand enough to absorb a lot of liquid. It's a little complicated to understand, I know, but it all makes sense in the final product. Roux are the basis for a lot of Louisiana cuisine. The more you cook the flour, the darker it gets. For the basic bechamel sauce, we don't want any color whatsoever. And to this, we're going to add 3 cups of whole milk. And better than a wooden spoon, I think, is a whisk. We don't want a lumpy bechamel. After 20 minutes, it looks like this. Now add 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne. Make sure your spices are fresh. Spices do get old and they do get rancid. And a grating of fresh nutmeg. Turn this heat down really low now. Freshly grated nutmeg is so much more tasty than already ground. Try it, you'll see. Utterly delicious. Now here you have pure bechamel. No cheese, no onion. And I chose for this recipe to add 4 different kinds of cheeses. They add different flavors and different textures, and they really add a depth of interest to the dish. So we're using Parmigiano, a 1/2 cup. We have a 1/2 cup of Fontina, finely grated. And we have 1 2/3 cup of extra sharp white cheddar. Cheddar adds the strings to the dish. And I think to gild the lily, why not some Gruyere too? 2/3 of a cup. Excellent. Stir that in. And you're ready for your mac and cheese, or macaroni and cheese. Oh, it smells so delicious. So there we have our wonderful cheesy bechamel. Now the pasta should be cooked by now. You don't want to undercook it if you're going to serve it right now. But if you're going to bake this macaroni and cheese, undercook it by about a minute or so. When draining, I always turn cold water on just to treat the sink nicely. Cold water does keep down the steam a little bit, but if you want an instant facial, just cook a lot of pasta. So put this back into your pot and add your sauce. For this recipe, we're using 1/2 pound of elbow macaroni. Use an imported pasta. I find that they have a little bit more texture and a little bit more flavor. So this is an easy way to serve a course. It's like serving any kind of pasta right off the stove. But as I said, as an hors d'oeuvre or as a heavy hors d'oeuvre for a party, this is so elegant and so nice. Now, I'm going to add a little bit of white pepper, finish off the flavorings, and a little sprinkling of salt. Always test. Cheese can be salty. And then fill your ramekins, little cups, and serve immediately. And another way to gild the lily is to top this with buttered brown breadcrumbs, or frico, which is those lovely crumbled wafers of baked Parmesan cheese. And here you have delicious macaroni and cheese. at its very best. Today I'm sharing a Castira favorite. It's naturally sweet and creamy, and it uses sweet and creamy red skin potatoes that are dressed with a little mayonnaise, vinegar, and herbs, and then topped with sliced hard-boiled eggs. And into a steamer basket, a little bit of salt, water to the top of the steamer basket. Add 5 pounds of red potatoes. These are Red Bliss. You could also use the small white potato, but I just like the idea of using the red. It's a very flavorful potato. Don't skimp on the water underneath the basket. Make sure you have plenty because you don't want that to boil away during the 25 minutes or so that it takes to cook the potatoes until they're tender to the point of a sharp knife. So here the potatoes are perfectly cooked. They're still warm. The skins will just peel off, as you can see. So very easy. Use a little paring knife. And if there are any little brown spots, you can just slice them off. You don't want those little brown spots. Cioci Kasia, who I learned this recipe from, Cioci Kasia means Aunt Catherine in Polish, made the best potato salad. So here we have our bowl of sliced potatoes. Now to this we add 1 white onion. It's a medium onion, and we have finely grated it on a wood rasp. This really is important to do, to grate it finely. You don't want big pieces of onion in the potato salad, and you want it almost undiscernible. You just don't want to know that it's there. You want to taste it. A half a cup of distilled white vinegar. You could use cider vinegar, but Cioci Kasia always used white vinegar in her potato salad. She also used about a teaspoonful, a little heaping teaspoonful of sugar, and about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of salt. So I'll do a little bit more than a half a teaspoon. Lots of black pepper. And 1 cup of mayonnaise mixed with about a cup of buttermilk. Now sometimes if she didn't have buttermilk, she would use water, but I like using just the buttermilk. And you can use a low-fat buttermilk or a whole-fat buttermilk. And if you don't have buttermilk, you could use whole milk thickened with the white vinegar that you just poured into the salad. That makes a very tasty homemade buttermilk. So see how nice and creamy that looks without being cream? And now add your potatoes. And we're not going to stir, we're not going to use a spoon on the potatoes. The way we're going to mix is to pour back and forth from bowl to bowl. You can also add some chopped cornichon or sliced cornichon. You could also use dill pickles, very finely chopped, which are very delicious, or you could use a sweet gherkin also. So here we're just going to pour from bowl to bowl. And as this sits, it gets thicker as the milk and mayonnaise gets absorbed into the cooked potatoes. See how good this looks? And it has to be chilled. This will be really tasty in a couple of hours. So look how beautiful it looks. I love it. That's a good mix. So then a little bit of a toss. Looks watery, but this will get absorbed into the potatoes as they chill. If using a mayonnaise-based dressing, it's best to let the potatoes cool a little so that the mayonnaise doesn't melt and become oily. These are plenty cool for the mayonnaise. It's very important to chill the potato salad before serving and garnishing with hard-boiled egg. So here's our potato salad. And put this into your serving bowl. And again, sometimes Cioci Kasia, Aunt Catherine, would garnish with hard-boiled eggs if it were for a picnic. Or if she were selling this in the deli, there would be no hard-boiled eggs. Just a sprinkling of parsley and sometimes dill. Level it off a little bit. You see how nice and moist it is? Very pretty. And then with your knife, we've already sliced the eggs. These can go around the perimeter of the bowl. And they'll get mixed in and people get a little bit of egg. Make sure your eggs are not too hard-boiled. These are 13-minute eggs, which means you bring the eggs to a boil, turn off the heat, and cover for 13 minutes. That's generally a perfect hard-boiled egg. And a nice sprinkling of parsley. Every region in America has its own version of barbecue sauce. Some are sweet, some are spicy, some are vinegary, some are thick, some are thin. But all are served with grilled meats, poultry, or fish. And today I'm making a classic Kansas City sweet sauce. That's tomato-based, balanced with a little brown sugar and cider vinegar. And of course, just a hint of lemon. Barbecue sauce is a thick, piquant, or sweet mixture that contains ingredients like vinegar and tomato, which help cut the fattiness in meats. And the Kansas City version that I'm making is half of a small onion grated, cooked in a tablespoon of butter. Add 2 cloves of chopped garlic. Add some salt, some pepper. I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit and add the rest of the ingredients. I love making barbecue sauce. 1½ cups of ketchup. This is a sauce that my brother George made all the time. And he loves to cook outside, but he loves making his own barbecue sauce. And it's an adaptation of that sauce that I'm making today. 2 tablespoons of unsulfured molasses. Very tasty and dense. I love the taste of molasses. And 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Keep stirring. You don't want anything to burn or brown. You just want it to cook. I once was a judge in Memphis at the Great Big Memphis Barbecue. And I remember I was the whole hog judge. And I always kept coming back to pretty much the same vinegary, sweet sauce. It's very much like this one too. 1/2 cup of packed light brown sugar. A tablespoon of Dijon mustard. A nice big tablespoon. And, oh, here it is. 1/3 cup of cider vinegar. And for just a little bit of a kick, 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And this can just sit here on the stovetop. Oh, I almost forgot my favorite ingredient. And one thing I did learn down in Memphis was that lemon was essential in pretty much every one of my favorite sauces. And you could detect it, and you could miss it if it wasn't there. Now this sauce has a little bit of texture to it, which is the onion and the garlic, but we're going to put this in a blender because we really don't want any texture. We want a nice, smooth sauce. The sauce is cooked. It tastes so good. I just had a little spoonful. Now it's time to smooth out the sauce. And just add all the sauce to the jar of your blender. And be very, very careful when blending hot liquids. We don't have that much in the blender jar, so it's not going to splatter, but be very careful not to fill the blender jar too full when you're blending hot liquids. Make sure that put a towel over it so in case it does blow off the top for some reason. And always start on low. I always like to start on low. See how it popped up? If that were full up to here, it would have popped the top off. And then you can go a little higher and a little higher. And then to puree. That should be it. Looks really, really good. Now transfer your sauce to a bowl or a jar, or whatever you're going to keep it in. And while you're grilling your ribs, your chicken, your pork, just in the last 5 minutes or so, brush on the sauce. These have been perfectly grilled baby back ribs. Oh, they look so good. I'll let you taste them so that you can decide if you're going to make this sweet Kansas barbecue sauce. You've all heard of 7-bean salad. Well, here is the ultimate version of the 7-bean salad. Cesare, this is the oven roasted beans.
Yes.
Okay.
They are more dark than you see.
They are, yeah. How long are these cooked?
This is 1 hour and a half.
Really, that's all, and it's really much darker. Oh, and these are the black and white beans, calypso beans.
You want to taste?
Yeah, oh, of course. Extremely tasty.
So we take the 3/4 cup.
You can taste the garlic much more in the oven roasted, can't you?
Yes, it's more strong, and in the end there was the same quantity.
So now we have 7 beans all together, ready for the 7-bean salad. So we have chickpeas.
Chickpeas.
We have dried snow-cap beans
Yes.
that have been cooked. Those are pretty. Scarlet runner beans. Now look at the size of these. These are really amazing. I love scarlet runner beans. And the dried kidney beans, which are reddish.
The cranberry.
Oh, the cranberry beans. The Appaloosa beans. And the very beautiful that we just took out of the oven, the calypso beans.
So each one, they bring different flavor, different consistency. That we blend all together. Then we're going to add the onions. And the onions, I normally marine in the red wine vinegar because I like the onions, but I don't like the smell of the onions. So in that way, you're going to keep the flavor, the onions, without the two.
Is that a red onion?
Red onions.
How beautiful.
You can use the white raw onions too, but I grew up with red onions, so that is a nice color.
In Lucca,
too.
the red onions?
Yes,
Oh.
we don't have white onions.
Oh.
The only white onions is in the beginning, the season of the onions when they are white.
1/4 cup of celery.
The celery is crispy, is crunchy.
And 1/4 cup of Italian flat leaf parsley, of course.
And then now we need to put the olive oil, and I'm going to put the pepper. The beans, they want a lot of olive oil.
Yeah, they love olive oil, don't they?
So you're going to stir.
So pretty. So this is best right now, or will it be good tomorrow?
You can. Is that good now, but tomorrow they taste much better.
Oh, okay.
So when you want to serve it, or you can serve in a plate with some shaved Parmigiano in top.
So pretty.
And this is a good with bottarga, or if you like it to put some anchovy, or caviar.
That is so very beautiful. Have 7 beans, have 10 different beans. All the different dried beans, try what you haven't before. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha.
Now the first thing we do with a shoulder like this is to dry marinate it. And I'm making the marinade. It is 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, packed, 2 tablespoons of coarse salt, which doesn't have to be packed, 2 teaspoons of sweet paprika, and use a nice sweet paprika, 1 teaspoon of pepper, a 1/2 teaspoon of dry mustard, and cayenne pepper, a 1/2 teaspoon, and cumin. Cumin, oh, just a wonderful, wonderful flavor, and that too is about a 1/2 teaspoon. So stir that all up, and it's quite red, so I would suggest wear a pair of rubber gloves to rub this into the meat. I keep a box of surgeon gloves right under my kitchen sink because it really does save your hands from peeling beets to chopping very green herbs to rubbing something like a pork shoulder. And as you rub it in, you can see the fat assumes the color of the paprika and the cumin. And this should stay on the meat for, as I said, 2 hours or overnight in the refrigerator. So I would say that's well coated, and now wrap the whole thing with some plastic wrap and put into the refrigerator. The sugar caramelizes as the meat cooks and adds a nice deep color to the meat. So here's our colorful pork butt. It is a little bit wet, so make sure before you start to brown it, and we're going to sear it in a big pan in which it's going to cook, make sure that you try to dry it as well as you can with paper toweling. Just about 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Canola oil is good, grapeseed oil is good. You could use peanut oil. Now the pork butt, as you heard Pat LaFreda tell us, is really not the butt of the pork, but the shoulder. Pork butt like this, it weighs anywhere from 8 to 10 pounds, and it will serve a crowd as shredded pork on buns with barbecue sauce. That's how we're going to use it. It is browning nicely. You can see the bone right here. That's the shoulder bone. And remember which side is the fatty side, because that side has to be up during the braising process, because all that nice fat's going to drip down the sides and into the meat itself. See the nice caramelization? That's the sugar. It is helping this meat caramelize, and it smells so good. I can smell the cayenne, and I can smell the cumin and the paprika all at once. And we have one more side to brown. Okay, we're ready to go here. Now add 2 cups of water. It might splutter a little bit. Have your oven preheated to 325 degrees, and make sure that you have moved all racks to 2 inches from the bottom. You have to leave plenty of room for a pot this size. We'll cover the pot and into the oven. It's going to be staying in there for 5 to 6 hours, and you're going to baste it every hour for 5 to 6 hours. There it is in all its glory. It is a fantastic piece of meat. Oh, it is falling apart, as it should. We're going to use 2 forks to shred it and have the best pork barbecue. And that is a really beautiful pile of pork. Just take 2 forks and a piece of the meat and shred it like this. So beautiful. Because it's so perfectly cooked, the meat does shred very, very nicely. So now, would you like a sandwich? A pork sandwich, yum. And we have a Texas-style barbecue sauce, which is wet and spicy. A pile of the shredded meat. Don't skimp. And maybe another little spoon of sauce right here. That looks like a really good pork sandwich. Yum. Weighing in at around 2.5 pounds and several inches thick. A cowboy steak like this, well, it will certainly make a statement when brought to the table. Cut from the bone-in ribeye with a single bone left attached. It's thick and perfectly marbled, and because it's a relatively expensive cut of meat, you'll want to make sure you cook it perfectly. Let me show you how. So make sure, first off, that once you've trimmed any excess fat from this beautiful piece of meat, you dry it with a paper towel, rub it all over with just a little bit of safflower oil. Just a tiny drizzle here and there, but coating the meat. And have your griddle pan really hot. Now a sprinkling of coarse salt, rubbed in with some freshly ground black pepper on both sides of the meat, and rub a little bit around the outside too. And if you don't want this pretty bone to burn, just wrap it in a piece of aluminum foil. This will keep from burning. So, ready to start cooking. Place it one side down in your hot griddle pan. The bone like this is called Frenched because you've taken all the meat off the bone and left it exposed. One of the most common mistakes home cooks make is undersalting meat like this. You're only seasoning the surface of the steak, which means there's a significant portion of the meat that has no salt on it at all the interior meat. You want to make sure there's enough salt on the surface to perfectly season each bite. And safflower oil that I rubbed on the meat is a good oil to use because it has this high smoke point. It's flavorless, colorless, and it's expressed from the seed of the safflower. Now, I'm not going to move this for 2.5 minutes, so while it's cooking, I want to tell you that rib cuts are known for being fine-grained with generous marbling throughout, and it is one of the most tender beef cuts, and is a favorite for grilling as the bone-in keeps the meat extra moist and flavorful. This deep marbling gives the steak a slightly higher fat content than other cuts, making it extremely juicy. So now we're going to turn the meat at 2.5 minutes so that we get a really nice crisscross marking on it. And now another 2.5 minutes. A grill pan like this is a practical and convenient indoor alternative to a gas or charcoal grill. Although you won't get that same charring and you won't get that flavoring from the wood or charcoal fire. But those ridges are really good because they allow the fat to drip off the meat. And your oven must be preheated to 425 degrees because this meat's going to go in for 12 to 15 minutes after it is browned like this. How does it look? Really professional. I love that crisscross. If you were cooking this outdoors, use the direct heat to do the first 10 minutes. That's the direct heat. And then move it to indirect heat to finish the cooking, just like putting it into the oven. So 2.5 minutes, we turn again. So there we are ready, the second 2.5 minutes on this side. Now transfer the meat to a rack in a shallow pan like this. Another secret of good steak making is there's always air around the meat. Now this goes right into your 425 degree preheated oven, 12 to 14 minutes. It has to reach 125 degrees in the middle of the interior for medium rare. So now I've had the steak tented for 10 minutes. It's rested and it is ready to eat. Remove the foil around the Frenched bone, and you can move the steak now to a cutting board. This steak has to rest for 10 minutes, just so that all the juices redistribute throughout the meat. If you cut it right away, a lot of those juices will just pour right out. So I think shoestring fries, a sharp knife and fork. If you have a big cowboy in your house, this will do for his dinner, but I think it would serve two very nicely. As you can see, there are many different ways to butcher beef ribs. They can be separated and cut into 2-inch lengths called an English cut, or if they're cut crosswise like this, they're known as flanken cut. Otherwise, they can be cut into bone-in or boneless rib steaks. And then there are these 12-inch long dino ribs. They are like dinosaurs, which I'm going to slowly roast today. So I have some oil heating in a pan, coarsely mortared black pepper. See how coarse it is? Really coarse. Rub that into the sides of the ribs and generously salt. And I'm going to put this rib right in, and I'll salt the other side. The pan is hot. Beef plate short ribs like these are cut from the short plate on the lower part of the animal's rib section. And the ribs are called short ribs not because they are short in length, but because they come from what is called the short plate. Don't waste those peppercorns. So as these brown, keep turning them, looking good. The bones are almost straight, and they have about 2 inches of meat on the top. And this meat is going to slow roast in the oven for, about 4 hours at 325. These have very little in common with pork ribs. They have much more flavor, much more meat, more fat, connective tissue, and they can be tougher than pork, but if cooked properly, they don't have to be tougher. Okay, so now we're gonna change direction. So now you can see that they have shrunken a little bit, but they are nicely browned. So remove them to a tray. We're just going to get rid of some of the fat in this pan. You don't want all that fat. And you can just soak up the fat with a piece of paper towel. This is a good way to get rid of excess fat. See how easy? And then you can just discard this. So I'm putting these ribs back in the pan, bone side down, and don't forget to cover them. Very important to get that very tender texture. And cover this tightly with aluminum foil. Notice I put parchment first, which protects the meat from the aluminum, but the aluminum crimps nicely around the pot. So there, that's nicely covered right into a 325-degree oven for 4 hours. So now remove the ribs one at a time, and you're going to kind of carve them off the bone. And they're coming right off the bone. You can see how easily they fall. And so this bone is important because this is sort of your little boat on which you're going to reconstruct the rib. Now, let's see. It has this little piece of cartilage right under here, which should be removed. It's a little tough to chew, and ground up, it's great for the four-legged creatures in your house. The dogs I'm talking about. Okay. So this is a membrane that kind of helps adhere the meat to the bone. We want to remove that. So this is very much like dealing with short ribs. You have that same membrane to remove. And make sure your knives are sharp. And there. So now turn this over and slice crosswise into chunks. And you can pick up the whole rib and lay it flat on top of the bone. This is a very nice way to serve it. And you can garnish the meat now with just a sprinkling of lemon juice, a handful of chopped green olives. They can fall on the board. It's a perfect board. Some watercress leaves or arugula leaves. This is arugula, baby arugula. Looks so pretty. I think another squeeze of lemon juice and some nice freshly grated horseradish. This is very strong. You don't want to get too close to it. Best done outside. There it is. Just put this all across the top. And the meat's quite well seasoned. Remember how much pepper and salt we put on it? And that is the way to serve rib steaks. Kebabs are thought to have originated with ancient Middle Eastern cooks who, out of necessity, had to devise a way of cooking meat with limited fire. Their solution was to thread small pieces of meat onto skewers, which cook faster than larger ones. As you'll see in this recipe for curry yogurt marinated lamb kebabs, they cook in no time at all. So we have 1 cup of Greek yogurt, unflavored, could be low fat or regular. Add to that a half a teaspoon of cumin, 2 tablespoons of finely chopped onion, and I'm mixing this whole dressing right in the same pan in which the lamb and the vegetables will marinate. Some honey, very nice, a half a teaspoon of honey, Greek honey if you have it. This is my own honey. The zest of 1 lime. We're making a very flavorful marinade. Lamb just takes flavors really, really well. We also want the juice of half of a juicy lime. If your lime is kind of dry, use the whole lime. It's pretty. So you can cut your lime in half and juice it right into this mixture. And always zest before you try to juice it. Be pretty hard to zest that. Some salt and pepper. Oh, 2 tablespoons of fresh mint chopped. And some curry powder, half a teaspoon. Get a nice flavorful fresh curry powder. Important that it be fresh. Spices do tend to get old, do tend to lose their potency, their flavor, and they also get rancid. So I think that's it for our marinade. Cut the meat into 1.5-inch cubes. This is boneless leg of lamb. Some of the pieces may be slightly smaller, then you can put 2 pieces together. But isn't that gorgeous, gorgeous lamb? Oh, so beautiful. You can cook these on a griddle pan right in your kitchen. You can also do them on a gas grill or on a wood-fired grill. Just be sure that you don't have the fire so hot that the kebabs burn. You want to cook them fast but tenderly. So here we have the lamb all cut up. Pretty, isn't it? This is going to marinate for at least 8 hours in the refrigerator, and you can do it overnight too. Now I'm cutting these, I call this quarter cut. Keep turning the squash a quarter turn so you're getting an odd shape, and always cut off the end like that, like that. It gives more surface area and it's prettier and chunkier. And the same with the yellow squash. And they all end up kind of being the same size, which is nice. And if you wish, a tiny bit more salt can be sprinkled and a little bit more pepper. Cover and refrigerate. So now here's lamb that has marinated with the squash 8 hours. Make sure that the pieces are all about the same size and don't crowd the skewers. Bamboo skewers like these are readily available in supermarkets and cooking supply stores, and they should be soaked in water before you use them. It prevents them from burning once they're on a griddle pan like this or on a grill. I also like sometimes to use these beautiful rosemary branches. If you have a big rosemary plant or have access to rosemary that's growing quite large, you can use this because it's a woody stem. Just make sure that you cut the ends of these branches with scissors so you make a little point. Now to make a rosemary skewer, take a branch and just strip the leaves right off. They come off so easily, and oh, are they a fragrant, wonderful skewer. And these two can sit in a little bit of water until you're ready to use them. So now skewer meat. We're going to cook all the meat on the rosemary, and I'm going to do all the meat together and the vegetables together so that everything cooks in the same amount of time. So per person, I would say 4 pieces of meat. I'm going through the meat through the longest side exposing the largest bit of meat to the heat. Now this can be done before your guests arrive, so you're not there with dirty hands skewering kebabs. And now for the vegetables, you can use the bamboo and go also through the squash. And this can be done alternating colors. So now just lay your kebabs on your grill or your griddle. And look how pretty these look on the rosemary. These are best eaten as soon as they're done, but they can be made in advance also and kept warm. And they take about 4 minutes per side, so stay nearby and cook away. So once they've cooked about 4 minutes per side, just remove them to a platter and enjoy. These look so great, and I'm sure you're going to love their taste. So once off the flame, hot off the grill, just sprinkle with a little bit more salt, and you will definitely enjoy curry yogurt marinated lamb kebabs. Some claim Cowboy Cookies got their name because the recipe was developed in Texas. Others say they can withstand long days in a saddlebag. Whatever their origin, they're chock full of a mouth-watering combination of oats, pecans, chocolate, and coconut. First off, cream 1½ sticks of butter until pale and fluffy with 3/4 of a cup of light brown sugar, packed of course. Also add a ½ cup of granulated sugar. The addition of brown sugar gives these cookies a chewier texture and a deeper flavor. Let that cream, and in another bowl, whisk 1½ cups of all-purpose flour with 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1½ cups of rolled oats. And don't forget the baking soda. That's because we've added the brown sugar, and the acidic nature of brown sugar requires the addition of a leavener like baking soda. And just whisk these things all together. Those are our dry ingredients. This is a very easy cookie batter, but it is chock full of flavor, chock full of texture, and chock full of goodness. So that's ready. Now this looks good. Add 2 eggs. And a whole teaspoon of good vanilla. We have 1 cup of pecan halves that are coarsely chopped. We have semi-sweet chocolate, 6 ounces. You can use semi-sweet or bittersweet. And 1/2 cup of unsweetened shredded coconut. Hold that until you add all your dry ingredients. There's no milk or liquid, so add this slowly so it can incorporate into the butter sugar. You see, it's really a nice thick but moist batter. Add your coconut, your pecans, and this batter can be made yesterday for today. Actually, a lot of people are saying to make your cookie dough a day or 2 in advance of baking, so the flavors really can shine. You can also freeze cookie dough, and I'm adding the chocolate, big chunks of bittersweet chocolate. And that is it. There, I don't want to break up the chocolate too much. And we'll scrape everything together. And at this point, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Now I have 3 baking sheets lined with parchment paper. 3 because this recipe makes somewhere between 16 and 17 cookies. And I'm using a 1/4 cup ice cream scoop, 1/4 of a cup. So just fill it like that. Place 5 or 6 cookies per sheet. Using a scoop, of course, gives you a uniform sized cookie, which is nice. Using an offset spatula like that
Just want to flatten it a little bit. You can use your hand. Very dense, very heavy. Pretty, pretty. We're going to need 2 ovens or 3 racks. And if you only have 1 oven with 2 racks, put 1 tray into your refrigerator. 350, 16 to 18 minutes. Rotate the trays about halfway through. So here's the cowboy cookie. Really chunky. Look at all that good stuff. Save that one for later, because now we're going to make s'mores. So to make the s'mores, take 1 cookie, put your chocolate on it, I think 2 squares of milk chocolate, and roast your marshmallows very carefully. You can do it right over your gas flame. Outdoors, better. Be careful if you're doing this indoors. Now these are perfectly roasted. 1 on each piece of chocolate. Pull off with your cookie. The idea is that the hot marshmallow melts the milk chocolate and it makes a beautiful sandwich just like this. I think you'll agree these cookies have a winning combination of ingredients that any cowboy or cowgirl would enjoy, and you enjoy them too.